Assalamualaikum Waalaikumsalam. Assalamualaikum
Waalaikumsalam.
Assalamualaikum
Waalaikumsalam.
Assalamualaikum Waalaikumsalam.
Hello and welcome to a new edition of our program, Peace Be Upon You. And in this edition of the program, we will continue our discussions about how can we worship God in all acts of life, in buying, selling, in work, and even in simple things. And today we are joined by Dr. Saeed Kishkan, Islamic researcher at Al-Azhar, and he is going to talk to us more about this issue. Yes, Dr. Saeed, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr. Shireen, and to all our dear respected viewers all over the world. Welcome to a new episode of your program, Peace Be Upon You. Salamullahi alaikum wa rahmatuhu wa barakatuh.
Dr. Saeed, how can helping people and fulfilling their needs be an act of worship and closeness to Allah Almighty?
All praise due to Allah. May Allah be send blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad, his family, his companions, and upon all previous Prophet Musa and Isa Ibrahim. And we are Muslim. We make no difference among all of them. لا نفرق بين أحد منهم ونحن له مسلمون. Alhamdulillah الذي جعلنا مسلمين. Thanks to Allah that Allah make us as a Muslim and characterize us as a moderate and just ummah. وكذلك جعلناكم أمة وسطا. يقول ابن القيم, the scholar Ibn al-Qayyim, the greatest scholar of Islam, Ibn al-Qayyim says الإسلام كله خلق, or الدين كله خلق. The entire Islam is a religion of manners. And the last episodes we've been talking about Islam is not the religion of just prayer or fasting or sadaqah. Islam is a religion of compassion, as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaches us. Whoever doesn't show mercy to others people, Allah will not show mercy to him. And whoever show mercy to others people, Allah will show mercy to him. Irhamu turhamu. Wa'firu yughfar lakum. So show mercy to other people so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show mercy to you in the day of resurrection. And forgives others so that Allah forgives you. وَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ يَصُرُّونَ عَلَى مَا يَفْعَلُونَ وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. And bearish to those who are persisting in doing sins without repenting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is a religion of patience, as we discussed last episodes. That the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Quran teaches that this life is a world of a trial, a world of a test. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that shows us the adab and the khuluq and the manner of Islam in case if a Muslim is afflicted by a calamity, afflicted by a disaster. وَبَشِّرُ الصَّابِرِينَ, the Quran says glad tidings be for those who are patient. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that ما يصيب المسلم من وصب ولا نصب ولا هم ولا حزن ولا غم حتى الشوكة يشاكها إلا كفر الله بها عنه خطاياه. That nothing the Muslims receive of trouble, of a disaster, of a discomfort, or a sadness in this world life, or even a mental stress, or even afflicted by a thorn running into Muslims, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expiates a sins because of being patient to that. It's a religion of helping others people. As we said, that Islam is a religion of helping brothers and sisters. That Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam says that whoever alleviates the need of someone, Allah will alleviate his need in this world and the hereafter. من نفس عن مؤمن كربة من كرب الدنيا نفس الله عنه كربة من كرب يوم القيامة. Whoever remove a grave, a worldly grave in this world, Allah will remove a grave in the hereafter. Whoever relieve a Muslims, whoever fulfill a need of other Muslims or brothers, Allah will fulfill his needs. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam teaches in a beautiful hadith, authentic hadith. لأن يمشي أحدكم في حاجة أخيه خير له من أن يعتكف في مسجدي هذا شهرا. So whoever goes with his brother or with her sister to fulfill her or his need is better in sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than to make i'tikaf in the mosque of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam for a month. To stay in the mosque of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and make a congregational prayer, reciting the Quran and making zikr, do nothing just except stay in the mosque of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Rasulullah teaches us that one prayer in congregational prayer in the masjid of Rasulullah equivalent to 1,000 prayer in any other prayer. So imagine that you make i'tikaf in the mosque of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam for a month, doing a prayer, performing a prayer in the mosque of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in congregational prayer, which equivalent, each prayer in the mosque of Rasulullah is equivalent to 1,000 prayer of any other mosque. So doing i'tikaf for a month, performing in the mosque of Rasulullah in Al-Madinah, reciting Quran, performing congregational prayers, making zikr for a month. You know what's dearer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than that? To just fulfill or just to go with your brother or to go with your sister to fulfill her or his need in this world. لأن يمشي أحدكم في حاجة أخيه خير له من أن يعتكف في مسجدي هذا شهرا. So whoever goes with his brother to fulfill his need, just to walk with him, it doesn't matter whether he guaranteed to fulfill it or not, just to walk with him, just to support with him, just to go with him to fulfill his need. Allah subhanahu, it's better, it's dearer inside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than to stay and make i'tikaf in the mosque of Rasulullah for a month. ومن مشى لأخيه في حاجة حتى يثبتها لو ثبت الله قدمه حتى يوم تزول الأقدام. ومن مشى لأخيه حاجة ومن مشى لأخيه في حاجته حتى يثبتها له ثبت الله قدمه يوم تزول الأقدام. And whoever goes with his brother till he meet his needs, till he fulfill his needs, till he proves his right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make him stand firm on a day of resurrection, on which is a day that the wujuh has been turned, and then even the earth has been shaking, and even the sky is being opened, even the stars is being fall down, everything upside down on the day of resurrection. So in that day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala call it al-qari'ah, in that day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala call it a disaster, in that day in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to us in many surahs in the Quran that everything upside down. In that day it will be a terrifying day, the day of resurrection, the day of judgment. So whoever goes with his brother or sister just to fulfill his need, till he fulfill his need in this world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make him stand firm on the day of resurrection. ثبت الله قدمه يوم تزول الأقدام. يقول ابن القيم الدين كله خلق. That Islam entirely is a religion of manners. So as we discussed in the last episode, that Islam is not the religion of salah and sadaqah and siyam. Islam is not only the religion of fasting and performing prayer and giving sadaqah. Islam is the religion of manners, the religion of ethics. And that's why Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمِ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I have been sent down to just perfect the religion. Islam is a religion of being patient, as we discussed before. Islam is a religion of helping others. Islam is a religion of feeding the poor and helping the needy people. As the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he was asked, Ayyul Islami khair, what is the best good deed inside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He said that إطعام الطعام وإفشاء السلام على من تعرف ومن لا تعرف. So when the Prophet Muhammad was asked about what is the best deed inside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, feeding others and the greeting and say salam. Say that the greeting of Islam upon for those who do know and those who don't know. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that al-Muslimu akhul Muslim, that the Muslims is a brother of his Muslims. لا يظلمه, he should not oppress him, he should not wrong him. And in other hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that al-khalqu kulluhum iyadullah, all creatures are the kids of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are the creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أحبهم إلى الله أنفعهم إلى عياله. The most beloved people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the one who are the most beneficial to other people. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that وأحب الأعمال إلى الله, the best beloved, the most beloved deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, سرور تدخله على مسلم, that to make your brothers happy, or تقضي عنه حاجة, or to fulfill his needs. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he described the actions that leads to the people to the hellfire in Surah Al-Muddathir, that the people of paradise, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from the people of paradise, asking the people of the hellfire, ما سلككم في سقر, why you are in Saqar? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned and talks about the actions that leads them to the hellfire, saying قالوا لم نكن من المصلين ولم نكن نطعم المسكين وكنا نخوض مع الخائضين. They said that we were not among those people who are performing prayer. We were not among those people who are feeding the poor and helping others people. وكنا نخوض مع الخائضين. We were with the people, those who are المتفيهقون المتشدقون. The Prophet Muhammad says, our people are talkative, those people are indulging and killing time and wasting their times with no benefit and no benefit to others people. وَكُنَّا نَخُوضُ مَعَ الْخَائِضِ وَكُنَّا نُكَذِّبُ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ. And we used to deny and we used to reject the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We used to deny the day of judgment حَتَّى أَتَانَا الْيَقِينَ, till we see whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised us.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ما سلككم في سقر؟ قالوا لم نك من المصلين ولم نك نطعم المسكين وكنا نخوض مع الخائضين وكنا نكذب بيوم الدين حتى أتانا اليقين.
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful. What put you into Saqar? They will say, we were not of those who prayed, nor did we used to feed the poor, and we used to enter into vain discourse with those who engaged in it, and we used to deny the day of recompense, until there came to us the certainty.
So feeding the poor people is one of a gate to paradise, as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says. And actually, those people who are avoiding such great manner and ethics in Islam can lead them to the hellfire, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it after those who does not perform a prayer in this action that can lead to the hellfire. لم نكن من المصلين, the first action they said that we were not among those people who were not performing prayers. ولم نكن نطعم المسكين, and we were not among those people who are feeding the poor people and helping the others people. Feeding and helping others, feeding the poor and helping others people is one of the great deeds inside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that لأن يمشي أحدكم في حاجة أخيه خير له من أن يعتكف في مسجد هذا شهرا. Whoever goes with his brother or with her sister to fulfill his need or her need is better, is dearer inside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than to stay in the mosque of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to make i'tikaf in the mosque of Rasulullah in Al-Madinah for a month, for 30 days. Imagine that you stay in the mosque of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, performing a congregational prayer, reciting the Quran, making dhikr and do nothing, just to stay in the mosque for a month. In the mosque in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that performing one congregational prayer in the mosque of Rasulullah is equivalent to 1,000 prayer in any other mosque. So what's dearer inside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What's better inside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than staying in such mosque? Do nothing, just recite the Quran and do zikr and performing congregational prayer. What's dearer inside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to just go with your brother, support him and help him to fulfill his need. It doesn't guarantee, or you don't need to guarantee even that to fulfill his need. You just go with him, you just walk with him, you just help him, you just alleviate, you just relieve him till he gonna take his need, or till he fulfill his need. And whoever goes with his other brother or with her sister, حتى يثبت له حاجته ثبت الله قدمه يوم تزول الأقدام. And whoever goes with his brother or whoever goes with her sister till he or she fulfill his or her needs, till he meet her needs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make him stand firm on the day of resurrection, on a day in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described in the Quran that everything upside down, the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala call it al-tammat al-kubra, the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described it as a sakha, the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described it that everyone is running away from his wife, from his parents, from his mom, from his ma, يوم يفر المرء من أخيه وأمه وأبيه وصاحبته وبنيه, a day in which the man will be just concerned about himself and will flee even from his parents, even from his kids, even from his wives, just because لكل امرئ يومئذ شأن يغنيه. So in that day, which is a day of resurrection, the day of al-Qari'ah, the day of al-Tammat al-Kubra, the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because everything changes, call it like a disaster day, the day of resurrection, the day that we will be judged in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and people will be so frightened. In this day that faces will be changed. In this day that everything is upside down, the sama is being opened, وَفُتِحَتِ السَّمَاء, and the shams is kuwirat, the shams will be darkened, the nujum inqadarat, the nujum will be fall down, and everything, the jibal suyirat, the mountains will be removed. وَزُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْض, and the earth will be shaken. In that day, the man who goes with his brother till he fulfill his need and meet his need, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make him secure on such a day of judgment. فإن Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the Prophet Muhammad says that ثبت الله قدمه يوم تزول الأقدام, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make him stand firm. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make him secure on a day of resurrection.
Dear viewers, show break and we'll be back, so stay tuned.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون.
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful. I did not create the jinn and mankind except to worship me.
Worship is hence not a way to recline or escape from the different battles of life. We can see this clearly from the Prophet's position when a recluse worshipper passed by and the companions commended him. The Prophet, peace be upon him, asked, "Which one of you is serving him?" They said, "We all do, Prophet of Allah." So he said, "You are all better than him." He even prohibited his companions from being closed on worship to the extent of abandoning social life in the narration by Anas, in which he said, "By Allah, I am more submissive to Allah and more afraid of Him than you. Yet I fast and break my fast. I do sleep and I also marry women. So he who does not follow my tradition in religion is not from me, not one of my followers." In another narration by Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, he said, "You will get a reward for whatever you spend for Allah's sake, even for what you put in your wife's mouth."
Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam.
Welcome back, dear viewers, and we are still hosting our dear guest, Dr. Said Kishk, and he's talking to us about how can we worship God in all our dealings and deeds. Yes, Dr. Said.
Welcome back, Dr. Shireen, and to all our dear respected viewers. Continue talking about the manner and the ethics of Islam. Salamullahi alaikum wa rahmatuhu wa barakatuh.
Sir, feeding food to the needy in Islam also has a great reward. How could you explain to us the importance of feeding the poor in Islam?
Feeding the poor people and helping the others can be a great gate to paradise that can guarantee Muslims to admit the Jannah. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a lot of authentic hadiths and the Quran, when the Quran mentions Ashab al-Maymana, the right hand people, and Ashab al-Mash'ama, the left hand people, the right hand people, those people, the people of Al-Jannah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described the actions that can make us one of the people of the right hand people, Ashab al-Maymana. أو إطعام في يوم ذي مصغبة يتيما ذا مقربة, which is one of the great action that can make us one of the people of the right hand people. Those are feeding the poor people, particularly in case of starving. إطعام في يوم ذي مصغبة يتيما ذا مقربة, or feeding or helping and feeding the poor relative one. As in Islam, we consider if you feed a poor person, it's considered to be as a sadaqah. And if you give sadaqah to a poor person, it's considered to be one sadaqah, one charity. But if you feed a poor relative one, and if you give sadaqah to a poor relative needy person, that who is one of your relatives, is considered in Islam two sadaqah. A charity for the charity and a charity for being kind to one of your relatives. That's why the Quran gives the priority to feed and to poor the needy orphan relative one than to feed and help the one who is not one of your relative in Islam. As the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaches us sadaqatun, as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaches us that if you give sadaqah to one of the poor relative one, is considered as a sadaqatun wasila, is considered as two sadaqah, is considered as two good deeds, as a two charities, one for the sadaqah, one of the good charity, and one for being kind to your relative. And even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues saying about the attributes for those people who are ashab al-maymana. And also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give those people who are ashab al-maymana, beside that those are feeding the other people, feeding the poor and helping the needy people and feeding the others people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described them وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْمَرْحَمَةِ. Those people who are advising each other with being patient. Those people are being patient. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala afflicted them with whatever the trial, was a calamity, was a disaster, they are being patient. And they knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward them for such patience. And as we said, the hadith Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ خَيْرٌ إِنْ أَصَابَهُ سَرَّاء شَكَرَ فَكَانَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ وَإِنْ أَصَابَهُ ضَرَّاء صَبَرَ فَكَانَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ وَلَيْسَ ذَلِكَ إِلَّا لِلْمُؤْمِنِ. That is a beautiful case for Muslims. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala touches him with something good, he's being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's being shakir to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is good and this is going to be rewarded. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala afflicted him with a trial, then he's being patient, فَكَانَ خَيْرٌ لَهُ, going to be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْمَرْحَمَةِ, being advised with each other with a sabr, with being patient, and al-marhama, and being compassion with each other, being merciful to others, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam teaches us that the rahmah, being compassionate and being merciful with each other, is one of the great attributes. Once we show mercy to others people, Allah will show mercy to us. Irhamu turhamu, as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam teaches us that show mercy to others people so that Allah will show mercy to you. And that's why the Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was being described in Quran as rahmatan lil alameen. O the Prophet Muhammad, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. O Muhammad, we have just sent you as a mercy for mankind. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said a great example, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ.
submission, faith, and patience. You conveyed the noble message, brought us light through your guidance. Peace be upon you, my beloved, Ya Habibi, Ya Muhammad.
And finally, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Saeed Kishk, an Islamic researcher at Al-Azhar. Thank you, Dr. Saeed.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Shireen. Until next episode of your program, Peace Be Upon You. ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. Till next episode of your program, Peace Be Upon You. سلام الله عليكم ورحمته وبركاته.
And by that, dear viewers, we come to the end of today's edition of our program, Peace Be Upon You. Thank you for watching.
Assalamualaikum wa alaikum salam.